For centuries, European power was seized at the end of a sword or inherited through royal bloodlines. But in the 14th century, one family conquered an entire state using mathematics. This is Florence. It was a fiercely independent republic controlled by powerful merchant guilds. The citizens despised absolute rulers and structured their government to prevent anyone from wearing a crown. Compared to the established Florentine elite, the Medici were outsiders. They migrated from the rural Mugello region, a family of modest agrarian roots, looking for opportunities in the city's expanding economy. Their ascent began with this unassuming man, Giovanni di Bicci de' Medici. In 1397, he formalized the family's ambitions by establishing the Medici Bank. Giovanni recognized a shift in how the world operated. He saw that an enduring empire could be constructed more effectively on ledgers and debts than on feudal lands and stone castles. The bank's rapid expansion relied on a highly disciplined approach to accounting. The Medici perfected and standardized double-entry bookkeeping across their operations. By recording every transaction as both a debit and a credit, they reduced errors and gained total clarity over their cash flow. This mathematical exactness allowed them to scale. They established a true international branch banking network, stretching to London, Geneva, and Rome. Local managers held ownership stakes, maintaining standardized operations while responding to local markets. But Renaissance banking faced a massive obstacle. The Catholic Church strictly prohibited the charging of interest, condemning it as the sin of usury. The Medici bypassed this through the bill of exchange. A merchant could deposit currency in Florence and withdraw it months later in London. By embedding the interest within complex, delayed exchange rates between different regional currencies, the bank extracted a profit while legally complying with church doctrine. Their system was so efficient and discreet that it attracted the most lucrative client in Europe. The Medici Bank secured the papal accounts, managing the international tax revenues of the Catholic Church. Managing the Vatican's treasury made the family staggeringly wealthy. But in a paranoid republic designed to suppress individual power, possessing that much private capital painted a massive political target on their backs. When Giovanni's son, Cosimo the Elder, took over the bank, the rival Albizzi family decided the Medici had grown too powerful. In 1433, they seized control of the government and forced Cosimo into exile. The Albizzi miscalculated. When Cosimo left, he took his capital with him. Without Medici credit, Florence's manufacturing guilds stalled, and the local economy rapidly contracted. Just 1 year later, a frustrated populace demanded his return. Cosimo walked back into Florence, and the Albizzi were permanently banished. Cosimo understood that ruling Florence openly would provoke another revolt or an assassination. He chose to govern as a private citizen, creating what historians call the Republican veil. Instead of taking office, he manipulated the mechanics of the Republic. Magistrates were supposed to be drawn at random from leather bags. Cosimo replaced this with a system managed by loyal scrutineers, ensuring only hand-picked Medici allies made it into the executive council. He had engineered a flawless political paradox. Cosimo proved that ultimate authority comes from controlling the men who hold the titles, without ever taking the risk of wearing one yourself. To maintain this illusion of a functioning republic, and to distract citizens from their eroded political liberty, Cosimo deployed his wealth in a highly visible way, massive cultural patronage. He funded architect Filippo Brunelleschi to construct the impossible, the massive dome of the Florence Cathedral. It was a staggering engineering achievement that immediately became a towering symbol of civic pride, entirely financed by Medici money. He commissioned revolutionary works for both public spaces and his private palace. By supporting artists like Donatello, who produced daring, controversial pieces like this Bronze David, Cosimo positioned his family as enlightened, indispensable benefactors. He didn't stop at visual art. He purchased intellect. Cosimo established the Platonic Academy, financing the translation of ancient Greek texts and securing the loyalty of the era's foremost philosophers. He had effectively purchased the early Renaissance. By transforming cold, mathematical banking wealth into cultural immortality, Cosimo earned the official title of Pater Patriae, Father of the Country. When his grandson, Lorenzo the Magnificent, took control, the Medici had reached an absolute cultural zenith. But Lorenzo operated much more like a traditional monarch, and the careful republican veil Cosimo had woven began to tear. Their monopoly on power ignited the resentment of the rival Pazzi banking family. Backed by a hostile pope who wanted the Medici removed, the Pazzi formulated a plot to assassinate Lorenzo and his brother, Giuliano. The conspirators chose their moment. On Easter Sunday, 1478, during High Mass inside the Florence Cathedral, the assassins unleashed a sudden, brutal attack. In the chaos near the altar, Giuliano de' Medici was stabbed to death on the floor. Lorenzo narrowly survived, escaping with a severe wound to his neck. Lorenzo's retaliation was immediate and terrifying. Abandoning his grandfather's subtle political maneuvering, he executed a public and exceptionally violent purge, hanging the conspirators, including an archbishop, from the windows of the government palace. The family had come a long way from the quiet accounting desks of the Mugello. The Medici proved that ledgers can build an empire, and art can buy its legitimacy, but absolute power ultimately requires blood to sustain it. In 1494, the Medici family lost their city. An invading French army and a popular revolt forced them out of Florence, leaving their legendary bank bankrupt and their political power erased. The city fell to Girolamo Savonarola, a strict fundamentalist friar who despised Medici opulence. The family was exiled, stripped of civic authority. Surviving this exile required a massive shift in strategy. Local politics had proven too fragile. To guarantee their return, they needed a position safe from local mobs, divine authority. They secured it in 1513. Giovanni de' Medici was elected Pope Leo X. The merchants now controlled the highest office in the Catholic Church. To reclaim their standing, the Medici didn't bother trying to rebuild a local bank. They bypassed civic politics entirely and bought the voice of God. Securing that supreme authority was expensive. To legitimize his new status, Leo X spent lavishly, rapidly draining the Vatican's coffers. The most punishing expense was reconstructing St. Peter's Basilica. The sheer scale required vast sums of capital the Church simply did not have. This conceptual flowchart illustrates how Leo X aggressively expanded the sale of indulgences to balance the books. The Church was monetizing salvation, allowing ordinary believers across Europe to purchase spiritual pardons to fund the Pope's architectural ambitions. This document is Martin Luther's 95 Theses. In 1517, the German monk drafted it as an academic protest against papal financial overreach. Leo X treated Luther as a nuisance. Instead of addressing the grievances, he issued a papal bull in 1521, formally excommunicating him. By trying to cover the massive debts of a Florentine banking family, the Pope accidentally fractured Western Christianity. A few years later, another Medici took the papal throne as Clement VII. He inherited an increasingly volatile Europe, caught in a global power struggle between the Kingdom of France and the Holy Roman Empire. Clement's diplomatic maneuvering and shifting alliances backfired. He managed to enrage thousands of unpaid, mutinous imperial troops who began marching south toward Rome, demanding compensation. In May 1527, those troops breached the city walls. The resulting sack of Rome was a devastating event. Soldiers looted churches, executed thousands of citizens, left the papal capital in ruins. As his Swiss guards were slaughtered fighting a rearguard action, Clement VII fled through a secret passage to the Castel Sant'Angelo. He remained trapped inside the fortress for 6 months. The sack of Rome proved that spiritual authority alone could not stop an invading army. If the Medici wanted true security, they needed to restructure their political power into something permanent. From his prison, Clement made a desperate deal. He surrendered to the Holy Roman Emperor and, in exchange, secured military backing to retake Florence. Once the city was secured, the Medici abandoned any pretense of democratic rule. The Florentine Republic was permanently abolished, and Alessandro de' Medici was installed as the city's first hereditary duke. Following Alessandro's assassination in 1537, a distant relative named Cosimo I took power. Cosimo immediately dismantled the remaining political factions and centralized the state apparatus under his direct control. This map tracks Cosimo's aggressive expansion. He built a powerful standing navy and launched military campaigns, ultimately conquering the neighboring Republic of Siena and extending Medici control to the coastline. In 1569, his dominance was formalized. Cosimo was crowned the first Grand Duke of Tuscany, a title officially recognized by the Holy Roman Emperor. By dismantling the republic that originally brought them to power, the Medici transformed from vulnerable civic politicians into unassailable autocrats. Despite their new Grand Ducal status, the ancient royal houses of Europe still viewed the Medici with suspicion. To the established aristocracy, they were just upstart, middle-class merchants. The family's final strategic move was to secure true dynastic permanence by marrying into the French royal line. They achieved this through Catherine de' Medici. This family tree shows the Medici branch officially merging with French royalty. Catherine navigated a loveless marriage to become the Queen Regent, eventually dominating French politics during the reigns of her 3 sons. Decades later, Marie de' Medici followed the same path. She leveraged her family's immense wealth to marry King Henry IV, using Florentine capital to stabilize the French treasury. By capturing the throne of France, the Medici successfully converted their banking fortune into the highest aristocratic pedigree in Europe. To cement this new identity, Marie de' Medici commissioned the artist Peter Paul Rubens to paint a massive 21-piece cycle depicting her life. This artwork deliberately erased the family's merchant origins. Instead, it framed their rise to power as an act of mythological destiny and divine right. In less than a century, the Medici evolved from exiled bankrupt bankers to reigning Catholic popes, unassailable Grand Dukes, and Queens of France. The Medici engineered their own survival with the exact same calculation they applied to banking. Through deliberate escalation, they fractured the church, dismantled a republic, and secured a permanent place on the thrones of Europe. By the mid-17th century, the House of Medici occupied a fragile political space. As religious dogma increasingly conflicted with the findings of the scientific revolution, the family sought to secure their status not through new military conquests, but by positioning themselves as the primary protectors of intellectual truth. In 1610, Grand Duke Cosimo II offered formal protection and a permanent court position to his former tutor, Galileo Galilei. It was a calculated risk. The church was deeply suspicious of the mathematician's work, but Cosimo provided him with a salary and a safe haven in Florence. Shielded from immediate inquisitions and freed from the daily grind of university teaching, Galileo focused entirely on the optical instruments he was refining. He pointed these exact wooden telescopes at the night sky, gathering the physical evidence needed to prove that the Earth revolved around the sun. Looking at these pages of Latin text and astronomical diagrams, you can see the precise record of his breakthrough. Galileo mapped 4 moons orbiting Jupiter, and to repay his patron's debt, he formally named them the Medicean stars. By protecting the scientist, the Grand Duke ensured the family name was officially attached to the Jovian moons, documenting the Medici identity within the permanent record of astronomy. The next generation of the Medici doubled down on this investment. In 1657, Prince Leopoldo and Grand Duke Ferdinando II established Europe's first formal scientific society, the Accademia del Cimento. Operating out of the Pitti Palace, the group worked under a strict philosophy, provando e riprovando, or testing and retesting. They discarded ancient assumptions in favor of rigorous, measurable data. To capture those measurements, the Academy commissioned an arsenal of precision instruments. Looking at the geometric tools and astrolabe centered here, you see the apparatus built to test mechanics and pneumatics. Moving left, they developed these sealed glass thermometers to isolate alcohol and objectively record thermal expansion without contamination. The Florentine court successfully established a permanent framework for preserving scientific truth. Yet, as they quantified the physical world, they were completely blind to the biological and political decay eroding their own foundation. That decay accelerated rapidly under the 53-year reign of Cosimo III, starting in 1670. The pristine logic of the Academy was quickly replaced by a period of severe mismanagement. This graph illustrates the paradox of his rule. The climbing golden line shows Tuscany hoarding the greatest concentration of Renaissance art and scientific artifacts in Europe, while the plunging red line tracks the complete depletion of the Florentine state treasury. Cosimo instituted harsh religious laws, targeting minority communities and strictly regulating public life. His edicts strangled the local economy and alienated Tuscany from the shifting geopolitical alliances of early modern Europe. The political isolation was matched by a biological crisis within the palace. Cosimo's miserable arranged marriage produced 3 heirs, but none of them possessed the ability or the inclination to sustain the Medici bloodline. 3 centuries of high culture, banking dominance, and scientific patronage could not compensate for an empty treasury and a lineage incapable of reproduction. The collapse of the heirs was swift and visceral. The eldest son, Grand Prince Ferdinando, contracted syphilis and died without leaving a successor. The throne fell to the youngest son, Gastone, a man who openly despised his wife and spent his reign in a state of isolated, drunken retirement, guaranteeing the end of the line. In the year 1737, the youngest son, Gastone, passed away. With him, the male lineage of the Medici family officially vanished into history. With no direct successors to defend the territory, the leading European powers simply negotiated Tuscany away. The foreign Habsburg-Lorraine dynasty prepared to march in and annex the Grand Duchy as a new imperial province. The Medici state apparatus ceased to exist, leaving generations of unprotected cultural inheritance, paintings, sculptures, and instruments, completely at the mercy of the incoming rulers. But one family member remained. This bronze bust depicts Anna Maria Luisa de' Medici, Gastone's widowed sister, who now stood as the absolute last surviving heir to the Medici name. She was the sole legal owner of a collection 3 centuries in the making, an inventory of thousands of pieces ranging from Michelangelo's sculptures to Galileo's original telescopes. She understood perfectly what would happen next. The incoming dukes of Lorraine would pack up the galleries, dismantle the libraries, and sell the collections across the continent to fund their own expanding empire. Before the foreign powers could take control, Anna Maria Luisa executed a brilliant legal countermove. She drafted a binding treaty with the new rulers, a document known today as the Family Pact. On paper, she was formally signing over her vast personal inheritance to the Habsburg-Lorraines. In practice, she was laying a meticulous legal trap to anchor the treasures to the soil of Florence forever. The pact contained one unbreakable condition: the incoming dynasty could claim ownership of the palaces, the artwork, and the jewels, provided that absolutely nothing was ever removed from the capital or the state of the Grand Duchy. She explicitly wrote her reasoning into the treaty. The immense collection had to remain strictly intact, reading, "for the benefit of the public and to attract the curiosity of foreigners." Looking at this historic map of Florence, you can see the sheer geographic scale of what she locked into place. Entire palatial estates, libraries, and administrative buildings were permanently bound within the city's borders by her single signature. This signature triggered the transition of former royal administrative spaces, such as the Uffizi, into some of the world's first public museums. The Medici failed to sustain their own biology, their bank, and their political sovereignty. But through Anna Maria Luisa's final calculation, they succeeded in preserving the soul of Florence. They avoided total extinction simply by allowing their legacy to become the city itself.